Wow, it's a little early for ice cream, don't you think?
It's never too early for ice cream, Jim.
Greetings, fellow mortals. Just a reminder, saying it's just my opinion is for cowards who do not understand how the internet works. Like that actually stops trolls and assholes. Please. Oh, and spoiler alert for the video, by the way. Now, if there's a black sheep of the Breaking Bad universe, I would say that it would be El Camino. Most people raised an eyebrow when it was first announced. Many, including me, liked the idea that Jesse's ending was ambiguous. It felt like his escape in Breaking Bad should be left up to the audience. Did he make a clean break? Did he get caught in only a few minutes? Did he even live once the credits rolled? The original ending left it all up to the people watching, leaving a lot of room open for discussion. But El Camino crushed those discussions. There was no longer any ambiguity. We know everything that happened with Jesse Pinkman after Breaking Bad. While we don't know how the rest of his life went, we did see him riding off into the sunset to start a new life. Most people are going to assume that he's going to work as a carpenter for the rest of his existence. Hidden in Alaska, he'll most likely live a low-profile life. There's a good chance he'll find a partner and have a kid at some point, and no one will ever know about his past. Jesse Pinkman's life ended at the conclusion of El Camino. In the brightest way possible, of course. There isn't a lot of room for interpretation this time.
It's a matter of interpretation.
While most people did enjoy the movie, I don't particularly think that they appreciated what it accomplished at that time. In a lot of ways, it put a bow on Breaking Bad, giving us the last bit of closure that we needed. We got to see Jesse in his most mature and final form. We got to see him conquer his scars of being a literal slave. In many ways, Jesse is the final legacy of many of the other characters. Walter, Mike, even Gus. Seeing him handle business without them further emphasizes their stories as well. I honestly think that the movie came out too early though. Could you imagine if El Camino was announced right after the conclusion of Better Call Saul? I think the love of the film would have gone through the roof. The last story from the Breaking Bad universe before it's put to rest forever. Hopefully, it would have been a gigantic event if the movie came out in 2023. Even my wife would have watched it, and she hates Jesse Pinkman. He is a character who she can never vibe with. There are some aspects to him that are in her blind spot that she can just never get over. She can never like him. There's no working around it. There's no way to make her care. But we all have those. We're just too afraid to admit it sometimes.
I hate you!
Okay, sure, in universe, El Camino technically happens before the ending of Better Call Saul, so it would have been a step back in the timeline, and Saul Dunn possibly might not have hit as hard knowing there was more to it. That's a matter of opinion, but I don't think that would be true for most people. I think that the final step back to see Jesse's ending would have been the perfect conclusion to the universe. Better Call Saul still would have been the perfect ending for Saul Goodman, there's no debating that, but I would argue that El Camino is probably best enjoyed last. If a new fan was asking me the correct order to watch these shows in order to enjoy them the most, I would say Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and then finish up with El Camino. Because that 2019 release date didn't exactly help the film. Coming out long before Better Call Saul concluded made people feel like this section of the story was unnecessary. But if it came out in 2023, after Better Call Saul left open the fact that Jesse's car ended up at the border to Mexico, then people would have been really excited to find out what happened. Especially if Netflix found a way to make it an actual premiere, like it released on a certain date at a special time with a live presentation. It is possible, after all, with streaming. Everyone would have watched it, and it would have been one of the last of its kind, an actual worldwide phenomena, the end of a television show that everyone watched all at once, truly the end of an era, both for the Breaking Bad universe and for the real world as a whole.
I promised myself I wouldn't cry. I didn't.
because Jesse's final fight would have been a lot more powerful once seeing the full journeys of everyone who influenced him. We could see him use his brain in ways that only Mike and Walter would. The hunt in Todd's apartment reminded me of exactly how Mike would have handled that situation. The same thing could be said with the later confrontation at the welding company, but his harshness with his enemies has the tiniest bit of Walter in it, even if it's just threats Jesse has no intention of following through on. Plus, we got to see Jesse fight his PTSD. The scars of his past mar his soul even more than his face. Everything that he suffered during Breaking Bad should have left him a shell of a man. In a lot of ways, it did leave him broken, but for the first time in his life, Jesse decided to take his fate solely in his own hands. He faced the people who wronged him without fear and decided the future that he wanted. It was his choice, no one else's. And while I think his relationship with Jane was as toxic as possible for both of them, I like that she could have theoretically been the last words ever uttered in the Breaking Bad universe. After all, she is the greatest turning point for Walter's development.
I've gone where the universe takes me my whole life. It's better to make those decisions for yourself.
Watching the movie now, I think this is the most powerful conclusion that the series could have had. In many ways, each of the protagonists were people who refused to take their own fate in their own hands. While they made decisions, they let their pride, ego, greed, and their connections to other people keep them from doing what they had to that was best for them, from truly escaping. One of the most powerful things about Better Call Saul is the fact that almost every single protagonist could have gotten away from this mess at any point for a long period of time, with the exceptions being Nacho and Howard. Those two hit differently because they were not given any chance to escape at any point throughout the show. Like all of the other characters, Jesse was a person who allowed himself to be dragged around, mostly by Walter. His decision not to kill Walt was the actual first step to escaping. Jesse finally freed himself mentally from this mess he allowed himself to be dragged into. El Camino is just about Jesse finalizing his mental escape just as much as his physical one. It's a good thing that Jesse found his freedom when he did too, because if he lingered at all because of some sort of desire for revenge or power, he would have been trapped. El Camino occurs in September of 2010. Saul Gone concludes in December of 2010, meaning that 3 more months would have cornered Jesse forever, because Ed's vacuum repair business card was found with Saul. Meaning the feds are most definitely watching that shop now. There won't be any more disappearing acts after this, even if Ed stays free for his entire life.
Really makes you think.
And that's a shame, because I thought Ed was a super interesting character, even if he didn't show up a lot, especially in El Camino, where he makes sure Jesse knows that keeping one's word is the most important quality in a person. In a lot of ways, it feels like Jesse's final steps into becoming a real adult. You have to exist in the established rules. You can't get around that. If you try to, things will fall apart. Just look at every other character in this world. One final thing that I would like to point out is that despite the Western cowboy themes throughout the entire franchise, this is one of the few times where there's an actual standoff where guns are fired. You know Vince Gilligan was dying to actually do that since the start of Breaking Bad. Considering all the desert standoffs there were, it emphasized that Jesse is truly the only member of the Outlaws to escape. Out of the 3 central protagonists from each section of the story, he didn't eventually back out of his deal with Ed once he went through with it. He fought for and kept his freedom in every sense of the word.
I'm alive! I'm alive! Free yourselves!
Perhaps the biggest point of contention here is the question if Jesse truly deserves freedom. While he was manipulated by the people around him, he still did many terrible things. People died, lives were ruined. Does the suffering that he went through make up for it? Does the fact that he won't ever hurt anyone ever again justify his freedom. After all, we know Walter and Saul would have hurt people again. But Jesse is probably going to live a quiet life for the rest of his existence. Is justice about protecting the innocent, or is it about punishing the guilty? I suppose that's the ambiguity that El Camino leaves us on. Instead of leaving it up to the audience about what happened, the writers leave it up to the viewers to decide if what happened was the right thing. Moral ambiguity instead of story ambiguity. And personally, I think that's the better choice, making this the best possible conclusion to Breaking Bad. And thus, El Camino becomes the perfect film that was released at the worst time possible. You're welcome to disagree with me. That's fine. After all, everyone is entitled to their objectively wrong opinion.
I love you, brother. And I'm sure gonna miss you.
Please consider giving me a like and subscribing. It would really help me out. And hey, do you like stories about an interconnected world? Then consider giving my LPCO books a try. They are all connected in some way, but you can jump in at any point, unless it's a series. Then you have to start at the beginning. But I got 3 books out right now and 3 coming next year. You will not have to wait long for content. Either way, thank you. I appreciate you. Do not despair.